I'm excited about the things that are going on at Rosedale Bible College. I'm excited for Jeremy and Matt to be here to share with us. And so I'm excited to hear this report and to see what God is doing within Rosedale Bible College. And so I believe if I have it right, they have a video that they're going to show, and then that will lead them into their time. So I will ask the tech team to go ahead and play that video.
Just the quality of the education that is coming out of Rosedale is great to see, especially in the day and age that we live in. Having Rosedale be able to have our students coming out of high school go there to get their education. It's not only the education part that I see as being important, it's the foundation of a spiritual disciplines and things that they're learning on the spiritual end too. It's highly important that we give our students that opportunity.
One of the things that I heard one of the students say is they are developing a much deeper appreciation for just the body of Christ, for church life, for normal things like worship and preaching and even communion and feet washing. I think the spiritual formations class has been really a gift to the students and to the church. The development of gifts in students, whether that's a gift in music or in preaching, teaching, pastoring, students are given the opportunity to grow those gifts and also to step into leadership and exercise those gifts while they're at school.
One of the best things about Rosedale is the environment that everybody works so hard to create. The staff, the professors, the student leadership, everybody helps to foster this environment where students can be comfortable, vulnerable, and transparent as they learn about who they are and about who God has called us to be. You're digging deeper into the spiritual truths that God has laid out into the Bible, and you're also studying public speaking and other skills that are just going to help you along the way.
I really appreciate the delicate balance between a quality education but also intentional discipleship. I have seen how much the faculty cares really about the spiritual journey of each student, and not only who they are right now, but who they're becoming and who, by God's grace, they will be in the future.
As you have your students getting ready to graduate, what I would want you to do is to consider sending them, at least giving them the opportunity to enroll at Rosedale. I believe that your church would benefit from it. Maybe not just your church, but missions and the marketplace. We're looking for Christian leadership throughout all of the marketplace and in our ministries. And so this is a great place to get a platform, a good foundation for those students.
Well, good morning. It is, what a morning to be together. That prayer time that Dwayne led us through and prompted by Tim there was powerful. I wanted to just share a little bit about some of the realities that shape the way we think about what we're doing at Rosedale these days. So George Barna, many of you are familiar with him, researcher, does a lot of research on the church, on the current state of affairs, at least the church in the United States. And he did some recent work through the Arizona Christian University surveying theological trends among believers. He discovered that 62%, a full 62% of self-identified born-again Christians, so people who identified themselves as born-again believers, those are the words they would use. 62% of those do not believe that the Holy Spirit is real. 61% of those self-identified born-again Christians say that all religious faiths are of equal value. 60% say that if you do enough good things, a person can earn their way to heaven. In other words, God's not going to send somebody to hell who's essentially a good person. Over half of these self-identified born-again believers in the United States believe that people are basically good. That's our basic nature, our basic tendency. Over half of these people believe the Bible to be a critical guide to life, but they believe that it does not contain absolute moral and spiritual truth. These are positions that run counter to core Christian beliefs that have been held since the time of Christ. And again, these people are people who would say they're born again believers, and I should warn you, they're in our churches. I mean, in fact, maybe some of you feel sympathetic to those inclinations, because I don't think CMC is an exception to these sorts of positions that are being held theologically. And the reason that I know this is because some of our students that come to RBC hold these positions, and they come from our churches. And I'm not saying that to be critical. I'm only saying this. Maybe I'll share it like this. So when I was growing up, I'd hear missionaries come back from Africa, and they'd talk about Christians who believed in Jesus, but then also, went to the witch doctor when things got tight. Because that's how they were raised. It's what they knew. That's what you went and did. And so there was a real temptation to continue on swimming in those cultural streams. Well, we're really no different. We live in this culture. We drink from these cultural streams. Our children, they are spending hours listening to podcasts, our young men and women. They're spending hours watching YouTube videos of people that they respect and admire that are giving them thoughts and shaping their minds. And so it's not uncommon for young people to believe that people are basically good and that the Bible, it had a place, like it's helpful, but it's not the place where we find absolute moral and spiritual truth. So these are the cultural waters that we're swimming in, that you're pastoring in, and some of you probably aren't surprised by this because you've got people in your church who've talked to you about these things. In fact, I just had a conversation with one of you last night who said, yeah, that's somebody I just talked to. The Bible is not a sacred book that contains absolute and moral and spiritual truth. The church has always had to wrestle with cultural influences that are seeking to undermine a vibrant faith and life in God. And the question is, how do we wrestle with those things and bring our lives into alignment with Christ as revealed in Scripture? And that is the question we seek to answer at RBC. Our young men and women, as I mentioned, are listening to hours of podcasts. They're hearing all kinds of voices on YouTube. They spend a lot of time there. And when they come to RBC, they're invited out of that clamor and into the study of the Scriptures for hours every day, where those kinds of thoughts that are coming from the Scriptures and those kinds of thoughts and ideas are shaping the conversations that they're having as students in their dorms, in the student center, around campus. It's shaping the kinds of questions that they're asking our instructors. And they're being saturated by that at a key point in their lives, when the Scriptures actually have a chance to override all the other messages that they're having beat into them with the media they're taking in. And that's a tremendous thing to override. I remember being a pastor in your shoes and thinking, my people are listening to hours a day of non-Christian thought leaders, and even many Christian thought leaders that would be leading them in places that I don't agree with, and I don't think are scriptural, and I don't think reflect the values of the kingdom. But they got hours of my people's time, and I got an hour on Sunday morning, and the occasional conversation over lunch. It's hard to win. But one of the things I love about Rosedale is that people are pulled out of that melee and given a space to hear hours of the Scripture and to have people around them that are talking about the real things of God and how that works out in their lives in the real world. I want to share just a couple of things about this generation of young people that you might find interesting, that I find hopeful. And I want to share them with you so that you have a better sense of how to lead them as well in your context. Number one, I think it's important for you to know that this generation loves to be challenged. They want to be mentored and they want to be challenged. And by the way, that's not new. You know, that there's a lot of people that came before them, and probably you when you were young, that wanted that and sought that out. But they want adults who care enough about them to talk about difficult things and to challenge them in their thinking. So at Rosedale, periodically, the students initiate fireside chats. And a fireside chat at RBC is, when students come in the evening and we sit around the fireplace, and staff and faculty, they'll choose a few staff and faculty, and we'll pull up a table, and we'll just take questions on a particular subject that they care a lot about. And so, for instance, by the way, they ask hard questions and they don't hold back. So we've talked about kingdom people and human sexuality. How does that all work? Because, I mean, it's completely common for them to have friends who are gay and lesbian or maybe thinking they're transgender. That is not uncommon. And the question was, how do we walk through that? What do we do with that? We've had fireside chats on, especially last year, it was perfect timing during the election, on how Christians, kingdom people, relate to politics in our world. In fact, that particular fireside chat spilled into, was it 1 or 2 chapels the following week? And, the questions and the conversation just kept coming. It was delightful. We've also had fireside chats on the role of women in the church, which is a huge question for our young people. Again, coming from a culture that gives them particular perspectives, they're wanting to know, how do we wrestle with this? But this group of young people, they want to engage those questions, and they want to live out their convictions. And they want to be called up and challenged. So I'm actually telling you, don't give them a pass. Don't let them slide. Challenge them. Another piece of that challenge is that at least our students, and again, they're sort of self-selected. These are the students that are interested in the Bible, or they wouldn't be at Rosedale. They don't have time for that if they're not interested. But our students want to be taught the Bible. They want to hear the Bible preached in their churches. They love messages from the pulpit where the scriptures are taught. So don't be afraid of that. Having said that, this particular group you might find interesting is risk averse. They don't like risk. In fact, they have fewer pregnancies outside of marriage. They have less drug abuse. They have less alcohol abuse because they're less risk averse. They aren't interested they're a careful group of people. They're really practical. They don't want to lose money. They don't want to lose their reputation. They don't want to go into debt. So fear, though, the flip side of that is fear is a real thing. Anxiety is a real thing for them. And that may be a little different than previous generations. But I love this group of students and this generation because they're open to that development of conviction. And they're willing to live different. Yeah, they're less afraid of being different than I think many of us might have been at their age. I should say, they don't all turn out with uniform convictions. I have a bit of an ongoing debate with one of the students, actually. I brought 5 second-year guys here to just take in pastor's conference. And I have an ongoing debate with one of them, I won't say which one, about whether it's possible for Christians to walk away from Jesus. And I told him a story on the way out to illustrate, again, why I thought I was right. And he said something to me to the effect of, he sort of said it in a nice way, but he's like, we need to stick to the scriptures. Yeah. I like that, though. This group brings me a lot of hope for the church. It really does. So I wanted to ask a couple of them just to share a little bit about what God has done in their lives in their time at Rosedale Bible College. One is actually graduated, Hunter Tice, and the other, Matt Mullen, is planning to graduate this spring. So guys, come on up and just briefly share with this group what's happened in your life.
Good morning. So for me, my journey started before Rosedale. I had aspired to go into a missions program and kind of be a missionary. And then this whole thing, I don't know if you guys heard about it, coronavirus kind of happened. And those plans fell through. And so through the providence of God, I ended up on a journey that I don't even know how. I signed up like a month before. I didn't know who my roommate was until I got there. I ended up at Rosedale that fall. And I didn't really know what to expect. I think it was actually my first time seeing the campus once I got there. And so I didn't really have any prior knowledge of what that would be like. But I remember that fall just being really, really just I fell in love with studying the scriptures, and I fell in love with just learning about the Bible in depth and in a way that I had not done in my life up to that point. And what I realized the difference was that fall between the summer before I got there is when I wanted to be a missionary and when I wanted to go to Rosedale, I had a lot of passion for following Jesus, and I had a lot of passion for wanting to be his hands and feet, but I didn't feel like after I had learned, and I'll get into that, but I felt like I didn't really know the God that I was worshiping as well as I did once I got into the scriptures and see how he has revealed himself to me. And then along with that came, I realized that I didn't know, or the more I studied theology and the more I studied the Bible, I realized how much I actually didn't know about God. And that carries along with me today. And it actually has fostered just more of a love of learning the scriptures and more of a love of learning about God and who he's revealed himself to me. And so, but through that, one of the big ways that has challenged me and that has helped me with that is that the faculty there has just really taken the time to walk along with me and answer my hard questions and maybe even take some of my snarky comments to them about sticking to the scriptures and but it's done with grace and it's done with love, and it's just really allowed me to grow into a better follower of Christ and just a knowledge of the God I am worshiping. And with that too, it's fostered just a love for the church that I didn't have before I got there, and it's made me want to serve, and it's made me want to be in the local congregation. And along with that is I've realized that I don't have to be a pastor, I don't have to be a missionary, I don't have to do something really big. I just need to be faithful to Jesus, and I just need to serve in his church, and that can be an usher, it can be a tech guy, it doesn't matter. But yeah, so it's just really helped me and fostered me as a follower of Christ and allowed me to grow and to keep wanting to grow even more. So, yep.
Yeah, so as Jeremy said, I graduated last year, and this year at Rosedale working as the resident director for the men. So that's been a really cool opportunity. But when it comes to Rosedale, I feel like there's 100 different ways I could go in talking about the ways that it's impacted me. And I think just kind of generally though, before I went into Rosedale, I didn't really have a good grasp on theology or doctrine or anything. And I think in hindsight, looking back at kind of the direction I was headed, I think it was kind of a dangerous one that wasn't very founded on the Bible or founded in true relationship with Jesus at all. But once I got to Rosedale, it took maybe a couple weeks for kind of my entire worldview and my entire just kind of the priorities I had to be completely flipped. And I think kind of just the general principle of serving the kingdom and working for the kingdom is something that I think Rosedale really focuses on and was kind of the thing that struck me the most. And that's brought out in the academics a lot, which I could go into a whole thing about that, but I think looking now and looking kind of towards what I'm looking to do in the future, I think the thing that really sticks out about Rosedale to me is the community and just the unique ways that that community has shown me the different gifts that God has given us and given me, and just the different ways that plays out. I think especially last year when we were stuck on campus, that came out in very unique ways, some of which from the outside might have looked delusional, but to us was kind of fun. So I think one example, at some point like in fall, I guess we got bored enough that we dressed up as old people and played bingo for a night, and we made sure that we were done that by like 8:30. I think we called it like nursing home night or something. So I don't know, that's kind of a random, I guess, silly example of that. But I think just looking at over the past 3 years, seeing the different ways that people have influenced me and the different ways that I've learned more about myself and the ways that that can fit into the church and the kingdom has been really cool. And before Rosedale, kind of going into ministry or serving the kingdom's a principle that I don't even think I really understood and was something I wasn't interested in at all. My dad's actually a pastor. He's sitting back there. And if you would have told me, I got all the things as a kid, like, oh, you're going to be a pastor or whatever when you're older, and I would have called you crazy if I would have even considered ministry at all. But kind of going to Rosedale has really shown me the different ways that God can use us as people and use our gifts. And I think if I were to take my biggest takeaway from Rosedale, is that serving the kingdom isn't something that is to be mundane or boring or grueling or whatever. And while it has its moments, it's ultimately something that can be really exciting and life-giving. And in reality, is serving God and serving His kingdom is the most purpose-giving thing that we can do. I think Rosedale has been really influential in teaching me that. So, thanks.
Thank you both. I'd like to get into just a few nuts and bolts things before we talk about some of the... Actually, this is a really large thing too, Matt. I was going to say really large thing we have going on, but Matt, why don't you come up and share about some of the transitions that are headed our way here at Rosedale?
Good morning. It has just been an absolute privilege to serve in the role that I've served in for the last, 10 years now as Dean of Students at Rosedale. I get to walk alongside people like this day in and day out, and it's been a privilege, and it's something that, boy, when I got into it, so 11 years ago, I moved with my family up from Florida. I was finishing a stint as a youth pastor down there at Bethel, and I stepped into the role there at RBC, and I was younger at that point in time, and it was I stepped into that role with serving alongside of some people that were much older than I was. And it wasn't unusual for us to be in a meeting, and they would turn to me and say, well, Matt, what do the young people think about this? I was the voice for the young people. It's been a long time since anyone said that to me now. I'm not as much that voice anymore. But Jeremy said, he asked me to talk about some of the transitions. I'm actually, at the end of this year, going to be transitioning out of the role of Dean of Students and transitioning into the role of Academic Dean. Phil Weber is stepping down at the end of this year. He's still going to be around. He's still going to be teaching. And he's still going to be there to hold my hand and let me cry on his shoulder. He's said that can indeed happen, so I'm grateful for that. Taking the position of Dean of Students is Dion Gingrich. He's going to be moving down this summer. He and his wife served with Living Hope Native Ministries in Canada as church planters and as a pastor there. For a while, he's been in school now. He's a trained counselor. He's got a master's degree in counseling. He's just finishing up a master's degree in theology. And he's moving his family here to take on this position as Dean of Students. It was a little hard for me to think of leaving that particular role, just because I have enjoyed my position there, and just I'm grateful for the opportunities that the Lord gave over the course of the last 10 years, but at the same time, I'm so excited to be able to leave it to someone like Dion, who I think is going to do a phenomenal job. And so anyway, those are just some of the transitions that we're working on at RBC at this point in time, and we'd appreciate your prayers as we walk through these times. Jeremy.
Thank you, Matt. You know, a lot of the folks at RBC have been there a long time, the instructors, and so we knew there'd be changes coming down the road as people retire, and so it feels really good to be bringing Dion on. He has such a heart, especially to help young men and women really find their place in the kingdom and understand how to build community in the communities that they come from. It's a particular passion of his, so I'm excited about that. If you have your packets, I invite you to tear them open, and there's a few things that I wanted to cover in those packets. We continue to think about next steps for the college. There are, we're an arm of CMC. We're here to serve the church. And so as we think about what are the ways in which God's inviting us to move forward, one of the things that we felt like was important is that our campus begin to be used on a year-round basis. So not just for students that are there through the year, but that our campus become a center for spiritual renewal for the church. We're here to prepare kingdom workers, and we want adults and people from every age level to begin to know Jesus, the Jesus of the Bible, and to love him more deeply. And one of the ways we can do that is to begin to utilize our campus through the year. And by the way, if one of you didn't get a packet, please go ahead and raise your hand. Jewel and Erica will be happy to get you a packet if you were missed. So we want to begin hosting spiritual renewal retreats on campus. We want to begin to be able to facilitate more short-term training opportunities for adults and for young people alike on campus through the summer months. But the reality is that our facilities have been aging and don't accommodate adults very well during the summer because air conditioning seems to be a prerequisite for most of you. Furthermore, the restroom situations in the dorms as they're built doesn't work out real well to accommodating couples. Also, those of you who've been through the men's dorm anytime recently, if you stay long enough, your clothes will melt off. And furthermore, for some reason, that dorm was built on an old septic system. And it's held up okay, but over the years, the corner has sunk. And so we're looking forward to tearing it down. And I don't think there will be a tear shed. But what we are planning to do is move forward in faith. And you'll notice on the front of this brochure is a picture of a dorm that we'd like to build. There's actually 2 dorms on there. Down the road, we'd like to build a new men's and women's dorm. But we'd like to build one dorm which we will grant to the women first because men, 18-year-old men, things just don't last quite as long in their world as with the women. And so, And so the men will move over to the women's dorm, and the women will take over the new dorm, is the plan. If you turn to page number 4, you can see a layout of the rooms, or the dorm, the drawing that the architect has laid out for us. There are 84 beds, so that's an increase from the 56 or so rooms, or 6 or so beds that we would currently have in the dorm now. But more than that, you also notice there are a couple of banks of restrooms on every floor. So one, this is a picture of one floor, and then it's a 2-story dorm, and both floors are laid out the same way. But there are several banks of restrooms which allow us to facilitate couples coming to stay at the dorm, and we can have a men's and women's restroom for the times that we host retreats on campus. It would have been great to have a dorm with, the in-room suites and all that, but sticker shock prevents that sort of thing from feeling really practical for us, and we're trying to do this in a reasonable way that gives us the maximum bang for the buck. If you turn to page 6, you might notice where the first dorm would be built at the top of the page. Rosedale, whether you know it or not, sits on 140 acres. And so the spot you see is roughly, I think, 20 acres or so. And down in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see a tan building that says Learning Center. That would be phase 2. We'd love to either renovate the classroom building or build a new learning center for a number of reasons, which we won't get into this morning. But that is sitting on top of where the men's dorm is. So we would build the new dorm and in the same process bulldoze the men's dorm, never to be seen again. We have been really blessed. We started the leadership phase of this project the end of October. And so I spent a good deal of November and December on the road. It was just an unbelievable time visiting with some of you and many others around the conference and connected with the college, sharing the vision. And the response has just been really warm. And I could tell you all kinds of stories, the way that God's been providing. We have somewhere between 2.5 and 3 million committed to the project. It's a $6 million project, so it's by far the largest project that we've attempted to do here at Rosedale. So it's a massive undertaking, but God's been gracious and faithful. And just one real quick story of, God does all kinds of things and in all kinds of ways. And there's a church in the conference that there's an elderly lady who came from a Catholic background, and she's been at the church. And we've had students go preach at the church on occasion, and some of our faculty have been there. And so we've had some contact, and their children go to choral camp, or the church's children. Well, this lady, though, she doesn't know much about Rosedale. And